A dev edit is something a lot of authors hear about, but they aren't necessarily sure what it is or then how you deal with it. So I'm going to talk about today about the dev edit that I'm currently working through. Now, note, this is not a dev edit that I did, but it's one that somebody else did on my work. Now, a dev edit is called developmental editing, which means in theory, you aren't worried quite as much about grammar or commas or things like that. You're worried about, does the story work? Are there issues that don't make sense? And I tell you, when you get back that document, it can be sometimes overwhelming. We're talking thousands of comments and questions and things you need to think about. So one of the things that I do is, because I have to break it up into bits, otherwise it's just so overwhelming. Microsoft Word, which tends to be the preferred means to do this because you can turn on track changes. With Microsoft Word, I'll go up to the top and I'll say next change, and I will ignore all of the comments. I go fix the commas where I've done repeated words. I'm very bad about using a word like he went up the stairs to go up to the roof. Well, I don't need to put that twice. And it slows down the pacing of the story. So I go through and fix all of that stuff first. Those are the easy edits. Those are ones that don't take any time or energy to try to fix. But then you're stuck with all the developmental edits. And from what I've experienced, there's basically two major types of developmental edits for my work. Now, different editors are different, and everybody's going to have a different way of doing it. For me, the first type of developmental edit is, this sentence is clunky, or it doesn't sound right. Sometimes some of the sentences I use will use words that patterned right after each other. While they're fine to your eyes, they're going to sound weird when I put the book in audio, which I almost always do. Or sometimes I will just write a sentence that made perfect sense when I was writing it, but when you read it back, you're going, this just doesn't make any sense, or it does, but it's so clunky and awkward that you just completely rewrite the sentence. Now, one of the things that I have found is, lots of times you just go in and, oh, yeah, replace this word. Like, I said she drew her sword and swung her sword at the man blocking his sword. It's a bad sentence, don't worry about it. But now use the word sword 3 times. Sometimes it's like, oh, just replace one with weapon and one with blade, and I'm good. Other times, you look at the sentence and you go, this doesn't work at all. Don't try to edit the sentence. You simply rewrite the sentence completely. So I start out with looking at the sentence and go, Judea pulled her or drew her sword her out of the sheath, holding it up, and then viciously. See, I've completely rewritten the sentence. And that actually works better because you aren't stuck with the exact same verb subject tense that was in the original sentence. Then you get to the really hard stuff. Hard stuff tends to be either world building issues or character issues. Now, I will tell you, one of the world building issues that my editor didn't like, and after we talked about it, I had to agree, was I was using too many cutesy names to try to tell you that there were dogs and cats and bears and horses and cows without calling them dogs and cats and bears and horses and cows. And we came to an agreement. I'm going to go back and drastically change a couple animals and make them non-Earth analogs at all. And then the rest, I'm just going to change the names back to dogs and cats because it is easier on the reader to have things that make sense to them and add a few things. So you're scattering in that world building. Okay? The super hard one is character arcs. I have one character. He is the villain. He is a absolutely horrible, horrible person. And I did a little bit wrong at the ending when everything's, about to explode, that I need to go back and fix. I basically started making him into a nice guy, and I can't do this because this guy is not particularly redeemable. And if you read the book, you'll see why. There were a couple other issues where I needed to go add a little backstory in some places, But all of this takes time because this is not a small book. If this was a 50,000 word book, I probably would have already had it done. Right now, I'm probably going to cut out a little bit more. So it's going to run right around 210,000 words. That means it takes a bit of time to go back in through all these characters and make these changes without making them stand out. Because if they stand out, it's going to throw the reader out. All of this to say, a developmental edit is absolutely fascinating. It shows you some of your strengths and weaknesses when it comes to writing, but it also is not for the faint of heart. I am very good at being mean to myself and telling myself, you suck, you need to work better, you need to work harder. And a developmental edit will really, really do that. But it also showed me the things that I can work on. I definitely need to plot character arcs better, and that would have solved a couple problems. And I need to give my characters motivations to do things. The other thing that I need to do is think about my world building. And note, I don't normally write epic fantasy, so I don't have the luxury somebody like Sanderson does, where I can do pages of description. I have to do a little description and then the action to pull the reader in. Later, if I write more epic fantasy, I have a lot more leeway because people trust that I know how to tell a story and they're willing to go through and find out what it's about. So, all of this to say, if you are a relatively new writer and you aren't sure if you're telling the story correctly, developmental editing is probably a good thing. But make sure you find a good developmental editor. If they just say, hey, the story's great, you've wasted money. They should say, hey, I like the story, but here are some of the structural problems. I still need to get the story proofread because between all of the editing, trust me, typos, more typos were already there, have been introduced. So that still has to be fixed. But if you wanted to know what a dev edit is, this is what it is, and I hope it's helpful.